everybody. It's hard to believe we're at the end of the semester, but here we are. I know it's been a challenging one, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I want to talk to you first today about the final exam review sheet. So it would be a good idea if you could follow along with me. Go to Content and then to Final Exam Materials and look for English 1020 Final Exam Review Sheet Fall 2020. So you're going to need to take the final exam before 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, December 9th. The exam will only be open from 8 o'clock a.m. until 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday the 9th. So if you have not taken it by 11:59 p.m. on that Wednesday, you will receive a 0. You want to make sure that you get your exam in on time. We have very strict deadlines that we have to meet. And final exams in a college situation are not accepted late unless you can provide documented evidence. It has to be documented of a true emergency. And I mean, we're talking a big time emergency, as in you're in the hospital at death's door. And even then, it is very, very challenging. The final exam for English 1020 consists of a very short story or an excerpt from a somewhat longer short story that you will read. The story or excerpt chosen is generally not ever a very long one. Then there will be a prompt question that will appear, and your job will be to write a paragraph, just one paragraph, in response to that prompt question after reading through the story carefully. So in one sense, it seems like an awfully easy process. Oh, all I got to do is write a paragraph. But in another sense, if you blow that paragraph, then you've blown the entire final exam. So it's sort of a two-edged sword there. Note that you may and you should use your Little Seagull Handbook as you're writing. You may also look up any words, and you should look up any words from that short story that you don't understand. I also encourage you, if there are any footnotes in the short story, in the text itself that you're reading, be sure and actually read them. Look down at the bottom of the page and read them, because these are going to help you understand the wording with which you might not be familiar in that text. And the better you understand the story, the more likely you will be to do well. Note that the final exam for English 1020 is always administered cold. It is a common exam given to all 1020 students at Pellissippi State, and it's always administered cold. And what that means is students do not see the actual text that they'll be writing about or the prompt question that appears at the end of that story until they take the final exam. We will, however, spend review time this week looking at a past 1020 final exam text and prompt, and I'll encourage you to try your hand at actually writing a response to a practice test. So to locate the information for that, go again to Content, to Final Exam Materials, and then look for English 1020 Practice Run, and you'll see that sample text. I'm also going to record a separate video for you that discusses the practice run exam, so be sure to watch that video as well and take the time to actually go through the practice run. I'm not going to grade it or comment on it for you, but be sure and go through that process, because that's going to be very critical to your success on the final, just as the information here is critical. So here are the specifics that you need to remember for this final exam. Double space your paper. You're always going to double space in college writing. You're always going to type in Times New Roman 12-point font. That is standard. You want to use a standard heading and MLA formatting at the top of your paper on the left-hand corner. And I'm showing you on the final exam review sheet how to do that. Your name, then my name, Professor Ireland, then the course name, English 1020, and then the date. And you want to do it exactly according to MLA standard, 9 December 2020. Not December 9th, not 12/9/20, There's no comma in it anywhere. It's 9 December 2020. If you do continue your paragraph into a second page, place your last name and a page number in the upper right-hand corner. And again, there's no comma between your name and the page number. You would want to include a brief title centered in the middle of your page, just after your formal heading. The title doesn't have to be fancy. So for example, it can just state the purpose of your paper. And I've given you an example, a character analysis. Now, this may or may not be a character analysis. We don't know yet. But if you read the prompt and you saw that that is indeed what it's asking you to do, to analyze or sort of break apart a character, then that would be a way that you could format your title. You want to treat this paragraph like a body paragraph. This is very important. So in other words, there will not be any hook at the beginning as your first sentence. In a normal essay, we would have a hook at the very beginning. We won't have that this time. There won't be any introductory information like in a normal essay, but rather you start out with a topic sentence, a sentence that's going to tell your reader what this little paragraph is about. And in that very first topic sentence, you have to include the author's name and the title of the piece you're writing about. If you do not do that, points are deducted. So it's very important in your very first sentence, the author's name and the title. And remember, you're going to be writing about an excerpt from a short story. And so short story titles are always placed in quotation marks, not italics, just quotation marks. And the rule, once you get that in your head, it's so easy to remember. Titles of shorter works, like a short story or a poem, are placed in quotation marks. Titles of long works, like a book, are placed in italics. That's the rule. It's easy to remember. So think of that very first sentence, that topic sentence, in this response paragraph, almost like a mini thesis, right? So you have to include the author's last name in the title, as I just said. But you should also answer the prompt question in this very first sentence as well. And the best way to do that is to regurgitate, that's a fancy word for just vomit back up, the question in the form of a statement. And this is actually a really good tip for college writing in general, because there will be so many instances where you will be asked to do this very thing, right in response to a prompt question. So let's put that into action here. Let's say that your prompt question is as follows. Read the short story below entitled A Day in the Life of Joe Smith by Sam Brown. And then in a well-developed paragraph, describe 2 character traits of Joe Smith. So let's imagine that after you've read this little excerpt from a story about Joe Smith, you're realizing that Joe seems to be kind of an angry, selfish guy, right? And you're seeing textual evidence from Joe Smith's own words, thoughts, behaviors, other characters' responses to him, the author's narrative comments, that let you know he is indeed angry and selfish. And so here's how your very first sentence would look. In the short story, quote, A Day in the Life of Joe Smith, unquote, by Sam Brown, one may see that Joe Smith is an angry and selfish character. Boom. You've given us the title, you've given us the author's name, and you've regurgitated the prompt back in the form of a statement. So if the prompt question asks you to describe this character, then you've done so. You've given 2 character traits. He's angry, he's selfish. So the paragraph that you write, we're not going to sit and count the words, but it should contain about 10 to 12 substantial sentences, or around 250 words. And so no one, as I say, is going to actually sit down and count those words. However, you should try to adhere to that guideline in terms of your length. If you are super, super short, then obviously you're going to get points deducted. Be sure that you use formal academic language. We have stressed this throughout the semester. This is college writing. It's academic writing. So you have to elevate your language. Do not use first person I, me. Do not use second person you or your, unless those words are part of a quote. That's part of academic writing. Avoid vague, informal words like thing and stuff. You want to be specific and avoid phrases that feel conversational or cliched. After you've written that very first sentence, then you need to develop your paragraph with details and analysis, responding directly again to that question that's going to be asked of you. So we will not know for sure what the text is going to be that you're going to read. I don't even know yet. Or the prompt question until the exam happens. And the reason for this is that the English department wants to see how well each of you can do on your own. So while we don't know those things for sure, I can tell you that most past 1020 final exams do focus on character, on a character analysis. And so the question might ask you to define 2 qualities or 2 characteristics of a certain character, as in the example that I just gave you above. You would then need to back up your ideas with actual evidence from the story. Now, the question that you receive may be about a literary term that we've studied. So, for example, the prompt might ask you to describe the character's moment of epiphany, which you'll recall from studying for the exam on literary terms, that epiphany is sort of the aha moment where the character realizes, oh, this is what life is about, or this is what I need to learn from this experience. This is what really matters most in life to me. The prompt question could also ask you to explain what seems ironic about the text. And so, you want to think about irony. And irony can be situational. It can be, verbal. And so, you might want to think about that. But generally, the question does concern a character analysis. What sort of person is this character, and how do we know? You must quote at least once from the text in the body of your paragraph to back up your main idea as stated in your topic sentence. However, you can quote more than once if you wish, but make sure that you cite just after your quote with the author's last name and the page number in parentheses. Make sure you do this correctly. So for example, if the author's last name is Smith and you're using a quote from page 2, then I've given you an example here on the final exam review sheet of how that in-text citation would look. Notice there's no comma between the author's last name and the page number in MLA. There's no P for page. The word page doesn't appear there. And notice there's no punctuation at the end of the quote. The punctuation comes now after the last parenthesis because that's the end of your sentence now. Now note that page numbers will probably appear on the final exam, on the text that you're given, but if they do not, just count. Okay, here's one page, here's the next page. Remember, this is very important because points will be deducted for this. Do not drop quotes because points are seriously deducted for that error. Be sure that the quote does not appear all by itself as a sentence in your paper, in your paragraph, right? That's dropped. You have to incorporate that quote into some phrasing, some wording of your own. So some of your own wording needs to appear before that quote. And if the works cited information is provided to you on the actual final exam, then you must create a works cited page to avoid point deduction. So if that is the case, then you'll see a section on that final exam that'll give you the title, the author's name, the publisher's name, all of that information. And it will be up to you to take that information and format it correctly onto a works cited page. So remember, the works cited page always appears as a separate page after your paper. You place the 2 words works cited up at the top of the page in the center. You use a hanging indent. And the way I learned this is it's just the opposite of a normal paragraph. With a normal paragraph, you do indent the first line, but you don't indent the remaining lines. A works cited entry in MLA is the direct opposite of that. The first line of each entry is not indented, but the second and any remaining lines of each entry are indented. Your short paragraph response will be graded according to the English 1010 rubric for final exam assessment paragraph. And that sheet is found in this document, the final exam review sheet. Adequate obviously means you earned a passing grade. Inadequate means that your paragraph failed. And obviously, the more adequate your paragraph is, then the higher the grade will be that you earn. So those are the basics of the final exam. And now I just want to take a quick moment to go over some final exam policies, end of the semester policies with you. So final grades for your classes can be found by going to My Pellissippi and looking under final grades. And while we, as your professors, are responsible for submitting those final grades into the system, we're not responsible for allowing them to become visible to you in My Pellissippi, but rather the higher powers of the IT world manage all of that. Generally, grades become visible to you a day or 2 days, maybe at the most, after we have posted them and uploaded them into the system. But if you ask us, as your instructors, when exactly they're going to be visible to you, we cannot answer that question because, as I say, we do not manage that part of the process, so we don't know the answer to that. Please do not email me asking for your grade on the final exam or for the class as a whole. We are absolutely inundated at this point in the semester with grading and posting grades for over 100 people, and we just cannot do all of that and respond to 106 individual inquiries at the same time. So please do not do that. Have patience. Note that you can see your current running total grade for the assignments in the class by going to grades on your Brightspace course page. Grades are calculated by the Brightspace system. However, because I'm old and I don't trust these newfangled computers, I also keep a separate hard copy of your grades that I manually enter into a book, into a record book. And I check those Brightspace calculations against my hard copy calculations to make sure that they match up and that they're correct. For paper 3, note that I will use editing marks only on this last paper rather than making full intricate comments as I have in the past. And the reason is because, again, we have to get through a myriad, a stack this big of final papers in all 4 sections before the final exams even happen. And we have to stay on track. So we just do not have time with the last papers to comment thoroughly. But I do ask that you use the proofreading marks and abbreviations document to decipher the meanings of the editing marks that I'll use. And you can find that document on our Brightspace course page by going to Content and then to Course Documents and then looking for that proofreading sheet. Finally, I just want to tell you how much I've enjoyed having each one of you in class this semester. I know this has been a challenging one. Again, I thank you for hanging in there with me. If I can do anything to be of help to you in the future, please do not hesitate to email me. And hopefully you could even actually visit me when the world returns to normal at last, and believe me, it will. If you need a literature class, if you need an elective and a lit class meets that category, I teach English 2120, which is Modern American Lit, in the spring. I'd love to have you. It's an awesome, awesome class. It's always one of my favorites. So do keep that in mind. And also be sure to watch my other video about the practice run, and be sure to engage in the practice run because that will be tremendously helpful to you. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.